This is Dave Baran, and I'm here with Baxter Hines and Carol Goforth. Carol's a professor of law at the University of Arkansas, specializing in securities and crypto transactions. Baxter is the CIO and co-founder of Honeycomb Digital Investments and is the author of the recently released Digital Finance. How are both of y'all doing today?
I'm doing great. Hope you are too.
And happy New Year to everybody. All right, well, let's kick it off. We'll keep this relatively brief, but Ripple, XRP, and the SEC. Baxter, if you want to maybe briefly, in 30 or 60 seconds, kind of talk about Ripple and XRP, but then we can go into the most recent declaration of XRP as a security, and maybe get y'all's thoughts on how that will affect the digital asset industry.
Yeah, sure. So in my book, actually, I had a case study in chapter 7, the chapter on regulation, about Ripple and its XRP token. So Ripple is a San Francisco-based corporation that created the XRP ledger, which is basically a mechanism for banks and different types of payment transfer organizations to facilitate a lot of cross-border types of transactions and settlements. And the XRP token is what is used for people to utilize the XRP ledger and to utilize the utility of that mechanism. So there's been a recent announcement that the SEC has decided that the XRP token is a security, and there are several reasons for that. But the big problem that Ripple, the corporation that ultimately issued Ripple, or the XRP token in the first place, has, is that they wanted it to be considered a cryptocurrency and not a security. And so that announcement by the SEC really caused for a big drop in the price of the XRP token. And so that's caused a lot of problems in the industry. And Carol, I know you wrote a great article on Cointelegraph. Congratulations for your work there. I'd love to hear some of your insights on what you're thinking about the SEC's decision and kind of what's next.
Yeah, I was actually not surprised by the position taken by the SEC because it is so consistent with how they have treated other crypto assets. They applied the same Howey investment contract analysis. They went through the way in which this particular asset was issued, the profit motive, different things that the company has said, and really, it is so tempting to think of crypto assets as different kinds of fruit. If they're apples, they go over here. If they're grapes, they go here. If they're oranges, they go here, and divide them up between cryptocurrencies and utility tokens and security tokens. And the SEC has not done that. The SEC has said, I don't care whether or not they are also being regulated by these other agencies. I don't care how they are characterized by the IRS for tax purposes. If, in fact, they are marketed so that the purchasers are investing in an enterprise where all of their fortunes are going to rise and fall together, and they are expecting a profit based on the efforts of the issuer or other promoters, that is a security under Howey. That's the argument they used in Kik. It's the argument they used in Telegram. And in the enforcement action they started on December 22nd, the last day before Chairman Jay Clayton resigned, that's what they argued in the pending action against Ripple with regard to the XRP token. So kind of that's where we are.
Well, do you think that there's any other high-profile cryptocurrencies that could be the next target of regulators here in the U.S.?
Absolutely. I think the fact that the SEC has two favorite kinds of defendants tells you where they are probably going to go. The first is that they like to go after folks who are actively defrauding. And that's not the case with Ripple. It's not the case with many of the high-profile, successful crypto assets. But the other kind of defendant, the target that they like, is where they get more bang for their buck. They have limited resources just like everybody else, so they need to pick and choose their high visibility cases. And honestly, if I was Polkadot, which has now surpassed their token, DOT has surpassed XRP as the fourth most highly valued in the market capitalization. So it's very visible, and it has the benefit from the SEC standpoint of saying, just because you are creating a chain that has some utility, just because you're a smaller Ethereum kind of business, doesn't mean you get the same exemption that we gave to Ether. The ICO that Ether went through was in 2013, before we had a well-established explanation from the SEC. The ICO that Polkadot did was in 2017, which is sort of right about the time when the SEC was really gearing up. So it would not surprise me if a company like Polkadot isn't high on their radar. And if not Polkadot, some other high visibility company that did an ICO in the past couple of years.
Interesting. Baxter, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, the crypto world and the blockchain world is still very new. And because the technology is progressing so quickly, there is this temptation to take your product to market as quickly as possible, get adoption as quickly as possible. And, that attracts also in the marketplace people that want to make money quickly. And what you have to realize is that the wise approach, if you really do have a good new technology, is to make sure you're in good graces with the regulators, that you're taking the appropriate steps to play within the boundaries, because they are going to come after you. This is, as Carol alluded to, this is not the first time this has happened. And there are two issues. Number one, if you do get dinged by the SEC or any regulator, your price will go down very viciously. The market is again very fast in its pace, and it will furiously retaliate against any kind of project that has that kind of stigma. The other issue is, if you don't have firm foundation with the regulator and the regulator hasn't come after you, the market's going to discount the price of your token. And so you're going to pay for regulation in one way or another. So you need to really, again, take the right roads, try to build on a firm foundation, because once these regulators come after you, the market's going to punish you in a big way too. So it's not a place you want to be.
Yeah, I probably should mention that the other major crypto that I see is likely to be a target, although I'm not sure it's going to be at the target of the SEC, is probably Tether. As you're probably well aware, the company that has issued Tether is the subject of investigation by the New York Attorney General. And I think there is a very strong chance that a federal regulator, whether it's the CFTC, if this is treated as a commodity, or the SEC, if the SEC decides it meets the Howey investment contract test, is likely to pursue fraud action, simply because there are so many allegations about changing stories about who the company is connected with, about what the asset is backed with. And I think that's unfortunate, because the idea of stable coins do have so much future potential in the crypto world.
And just to add to that, what has always been alarming to me about Tether, and I also wrote about this in the book, is that originally you had a redemption feature with Tether. You could give your Tether coins back and get your dollars returned to you. They stopped that a few years ago. They also have not been disclosing the actual reserves that they have. They don't put out audited statements. And so while a holder of Tether may want to get those, they don't really have a way of making that happen in the way that a regulator does. So not only does a regulatory stigma pose a threat to just the functioning of Tether, but it could also force them to reveal those types of assets that they have actually backing the coin. What is on a secondary effect troubling to me is that if you look at the growth in the number of tethers out there, it's just been exponential. I mean, the last time I looked, it was something like $25 billion worth of tether were in the marketplace. That's up from, I'm taking a guess here, but I would say end of 2019, it was probably around 2, maybe 3 billion. So it's gone up by 8, 9 times over the last roughly 12 months. And if you look at the correlation between a lot of these cryptocurrencies and the growth in tether, it's extremely highly correlated. And so that increase in the supply of tether has you could say is one of the reasons why these cryptocurrencies have gone up. And if there is a regulatory event that exposes that there's not the money backing up the tethers like it has, like what some market participants have thought is the case, I think that could lead to some serious drawdowns in the crypto world as that issue gets sorted out.
Well, let's go from one regulator to another. Let's talk about the OCC. The OCC just gave the thumbs up, green light to banks to accept digital currencies as a valid, legitimate form of payment. How do you think the financial services industry will respond to these actions? And do you feel like this is a moment where we might see an inflection in terms of adoption when it comes to digital currency and digital payments?
I really think our regulated banks are going to be very cautious, and they're going to be cautious for a couple of reasons. One is the market volatility. If you have been following Bitcoin recently, Bitcoin has been on January 9th, it was over 40,000, then it was down to 30,000, then it was 35, then it dropped to 28, now it's 32. So when you have an asset that is changing value so rapidly, even though a bank could accept that, the risk of a change in value is likely to be something that banks are very hesitant to do so. That risk is compounded by our very difficult tax regime for crypto assets, where there is the requirement to keep track of when you acquired crypto, when you exchanged it, and treating that as property for tax purposes doesn't necessarily go out the window, even though it's treated as a payment for banking purposes. So without tax clarification and a lot less volatility in the crypto markets, I don't think we're going to see a huge change in the behavior of the banks. What is really important, I think, is the signal that gives to larger investment banks, investment advisors, accredited investors, institutional investors. It is a signal that these assets are now so prevalent, so so important, having now surpassed the $1 trillion in total market capitalization. Still a drop in the bucket in terms of the world financial picture, but $1 trillion is nothing to sneeze at. And I think that the way you phrase the question, is this an inflection point, is just an excellent way to think about. This has the potential to really signal to institutional investors that this is something they should be thinking about.
Right. It allows for a measured approach for the banks to start taking in this space. It's not going to open the floodgates, as Carol said, but it's going to start changing the mindset of a lot of these big financial institutions. And it allows them to, again, go in a measured way and slowly build up their capabilities, their infrastructure to utilize this new technology. I also think that banks being able to accept stable coins and things like that will be huge for them, because with the types of payment mechanisms that we have today, you have settlement times that are very long. If there's anything that can reduce that amount of settlement time, it will free up a tremendous amount of capital. That's something that banks are also interested in, not just the efficiency from a cost perspective, but just making your balance sheet more efficient is definitely something that's at the the forefront of the minds of people that are on the boards of these banks and the executives that run them.
Well, so let's talk about the new administration. Just took the oath 2 days ago. What policy changes do you see for crypto transactions and cryptocurrencies now that the Trump administration has transitioned over to the Biden administration?
Sure. From the SEC standpoint, anytime you move from a Republican to a Democrat-based administration, I think you would normally be concerned about a more regulatory approach, moving from pro-capital formation to pro-investor protection. I'm a little less worried about that in this context, simply because under the leadership of Jay Clayton, we already had a relatively strict regulatory reaction from the Securities Exchange Commission.
Yep.
We are going to be looking at, I guess, Gary Gilson, who was a former chair of the SEC, as Biden's nominee. And I did have occasion to go back and rewatch his keynote speech that he gave to the inaugural Harvard Law School blockchain conference in 2018. He's very knowledgeable. He was very up on crypto assets, very significantly concerned about the same things that Jay Clayton worried about: the money laundering, the funding of criminal activities, fraud on the investor. But he also said the same things that Clayton says, that it is a new technology. It is important for a regulator not to overregulate. So I actually think on the SEC side, even though we are going to an administration that people might think, oh my gosh, they're going to really stamp down, I don't think we're going to see much of a change. We might actually have a change that is more favorable for crypto from the Department of the Treasury. I think the last thing that Steve Mnuchin was going to do, or encourage FinCEN to do, was have a relatively stringent set of regulations for crypto wallets. And Biden has put a moratorium on the enforcement of that for 60 days. And I'm not sure that Janet Yellen will continue in that same vein. She always struck me as somebody who was more concerned about a broad-based approach, the financial impact, both from the perspective of the industry and of business, as well as market stability and protection of the dollar. So I think that we actually might have FinCEN regulations that are less rigid and more open to development of different crypto projects than it looked like we might have been heading under the prior administration. So I'm very encouraged by that.
And I agree with you. I was very pleased to see the moratorium on the Mnuchin regulations. I thought that was positive. I also thought, we're seeing a lot of appointments that have been made in the new Biden administration who have background in crypto. And so I think that in and of itself is a really good sign that you're not going to see this just total sea change or these barriers immediately put up. In fact, it's really been just the opposite. So, I really can't complain about anything that I've seen so far.
Yeah, the one of the things that's happening in terms of changes that are coming may not be coming necessarily with our administration, but because of things that are happening on the world stage. FINMA, which is the Swiss Financial Markets Authority, has recently added a new category of crypto assets. They divide them differently. They don't use the Howey test, but they've added stable coins as a different categorization. And I think that's a recognition that particular kind of crypto asset really does have the potential to avoid some of the problems of volatility, some of the problems of uncertainty, particularly if you get a stable coin that the public does know what it's being backed by, and it does gain widespread acceptance. I think that is an interesting development and might lead to a change in the way that the U.S. targets and treats different kinds of crypto assets.
Yeah, to me, the stable coins and the digital currencies are very important to governments around the world. And to me, it's really three reasons. One is efficiencies, it's just a better, faster, cheaper way of putting money around the world. Number two is it is essentially inclusive. With a stable coin, you can get to so many more people. It may not seem as pressing of an issue here in the US, but we do have a lot of unbanked people. That's an even bigger issue in other parts of the world. So if you go to Indonesia, it may take you 2 days of travel time to get to a bank. Everybody's got a phone. If you've got access to a phone, you've got access to a bank. So that's important. And then the third thing I think for the central banks and the governments is you've got to have some kind of presence with the stable coin to remain relevant. The technology's not going away. And so if you don't do it, somebody else in another country is going to do it. And I think that a lot of these places, let's take China, for example, where they don't have as many people who are banked, or they need to get more financial inclusion. They want to get more efficiency. They are really taking a lot of steps to get these stable coins out into the market. And so if they get way ahead of, say, the ECB or the Fed here in the US, that's going to put tension on the stragglers, so to speak, because they're going to, again, want to stay relevant. And so I think that that pressure from abroad is going to make our folks in Washington look mighty closely at the potential and what unfolds.
I completely agree.
Nice. Well, it was great to talk to you all today, and we'll pick this up in a few weeks. I'm sure that there's going to be many more developments in the regulatory space in this quick moving area. Thank you guys again.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.